Hello, hello. This is actually take two. You might not know that it is take two, but it is take two. Hello, everybody. Okay, here is the Tuesday poll question at Smerconish.com. To counter Donald Trump's influence, should the Democratic Party recruit and embrace celebrity candidates? Michael, why are you asking that question? I will explain in just a moment. First of all, let me thank my friends at Play Gun Lake and Parks Casino, New York, Philadelphia, Detroit baseball, plus the Pro Golf Tour and the New York Pro Hoops playoffs. It's on, and you can live bet it all. You can wager and watch. Live betting is better on the BetParks app in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland, and on the Play Gun Lake app in Michigan. You can bet individual player performances in baseball, like player hits and home runs and RBIs and strikeouts, or when it comes to hoops, rebounds, points, and much, much more. Get in on all the action, because whether your team wins or not, there's always a way for you to win at the BetParks Sportsbook and online casino app and the Play Gun Lake Sportsbook and online casino apps. The only apps that I use and recommend for this purpose. Play with live dealers right on your phone or play solo from wherever you are. Blackjack, roulette, craps, poker, hot online slots like Cash Eruption, 88 Fortunes, Cleopatra. They've got it all going on, all the fun stuff, all your favorites. Relative to slots, they've got those that are predicated on the streamers such as Walking Dead, Squid Game, Breaking Bad. They also have Cash Eruption, 88 Fortunes, Cleopatra, you name it. You've got to be 21. And in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, or Maryland for the BetParks app, you've got to be 21. And in Michigan for the Play Gun Lake app, you love to play, you play to win, you bet. BetParks on the Play Gun Lake app. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Okay, hello. Here is the result of yesterday's Monday poll question at Smerconish.com. I'm so excited to tell you this because it's a snapshot in which we compare, I think, favorably to the rest of the nation. Our unscientific but thoroughly interesting polling data compared to some very scientific and interesting polling data. What am I talking about? The Monday poll question was an agree or disagree. Agree or disagree, most people can be trusted. We had more than 33,000 cast ballots on this, and 68.36 of our respondents said, yes, most people can be trusted. 31.64%, the remainder disagreed with that statement. Well, yesterday, I went down a rabbit hole with some brand new data from Pew Research that talked about growing distrust among us and lack of faith in institutions. It was a really great conversation. It had a lot of mingling themes to it. But in that Pew data and in the Pew report, which was published yesterday at Smerconish.com, was the general social survey result on this same question. And where our audience believes 68%, most people can be trusted, in the nation, it's only 34%. Kind of interesting, right? Those who are listeners of this program, those who are viewers on YouTube, those who listen to the podcast, twice the national average in terms of our faith in fellow citizens. I thought it was pretty cool. Relative to the Tuesday poll question, today's poll question at Smerconish.com, which I'm sure sounds a little bit nutty, it is this. To counter Donald Trump's influence, should the Democratic Party recruit and embrace celebrity candidates? Michael, why in the world are you asking that? What do you want to do? Take us to the Jerry Springer dimension? Oh, now that you mention it, I have something to say about that. My thoughts are precipitated by Time Magazine. Time Magazine has done a deep dive. It's Charlotte Alter. Maybe we'll get her on the program, but Charlotte Alter has done a deep dive for Time Magazine, trying to figure out, in the age of Trump, with all the negativity that you hear from half the country about Donald Trump, why don't Democrats have their act together? What is going on among the Ds, and what is their path out of the wilderness? The Axios summary says Charlotte Alter interviewed dozens of elected Democrats, strategists, and top DNC officials in a new cover story that'll be out on May 30. Who knew that they still published? Some takeaways. They know they need fresh ideas and new leaders, even though they can't always agree on how to find them. On the party's aging leadership, she cites Axios reporting, which I've presented to you, that half of the 30 House Democrats older than 75 plan to run for re-election next year. Nobody's quitting. They're all sticking in. They think they're going to get a taste of leadership because the party outside the White House usually retakes the Congress in the midterm election after a presidential race. So in this Charlotte Alter piece, among the items that I flagged, she begins this way. You already know most of the reasons for the 2024 fiasco. Joe Biden was too old to be president, and just about everybody but Joe Biden knew it. His sheer oldness undermined all efforts to sell his policies effectively. Democrats lost touch with the working class, with men, with voters of color, with the young. Voters saw Democrats as henpecked by college campus progressives, overly focused on woke issues like diversity and trans rights. They tried to convince people that the economy was good when it didn't feel good. They tried to convince people that inflation and illegal immigration were imaginary problems in an era when voters around the globe were in an anti-incumbent mood. Democrats were stuck defending the status quo. The pandemic election of 2020 and the post-Dobbs midterms in 2022 lulled top party officials into a dangerous complacency. They thought Americans hated Trump enough to accept an unsatisfying alternative. They thought wrong. So that's the way the whole party begins. And then the whole piece begins, pardon me. And then she explains that she has spoken to dozens of prominent Democrats, senators, strategists, frontline House members, upstart progressives, activists, top DNC officials, with the singular purpose of finding out, how did they dig this hole? And how can they get out of it? What ideas do Democrats stand for beyond opposing an unpopular president? And then further along in the piece, she concludes by saying Democrats are coming around to a new mantra. Winning the argument is less important than winning elections. And as soon as I saw that line, I immediately thought of a government professor that I had, Dr. Frank Colin at Lehigh University, when I was doing my undergraduate work. And he said something one day that has just always hung with me, and I've cited it on radio time and again. Political parties exist for one purpose: to win. To win. Okay, so how then do they win? There's an essay in the newsletter today that I've been dying to discuss. It was written by Leon Neyfakh. He is a podcast host, and he wrote for the New York Times, and he wrote under the headline, Democrats Need Jerry Springer. And I love this piece. And this is really the basis, the impetus for today's poll question. So here's the way he begins his analysis. Again, Time Magazine, deep dive. They interviewed all the usual subjects. How are we going to get out of this hole? There's some common threads, but there's really not a clear answer in the Time piece by Charlotte Alter. Also, by the way, published in today's Smerconish.com newsletter. So now here's Leon Neyfakh. He says, given that Hollywood is often caricatured as a hotbed of liberalism, it's surprising that Republicans seem so much better than Democrats at the showbiz of politics. Two Republican presidents have stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump, as does another former Republican governor of California, obviously the governor. And yet among liberals, there persists a sense that running celebrities for public office is somehow déclassé, cynical, or simply not something a serious party does. And then in this thought piece, he says Democrats need to reckon with a new reality. The electorate wants to be entertained. And in this conversation, he then talks about Jerry Springer, of all people. Quote, despite being known as, Jerry, 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 and when it became a tawdry war cry, he was actually a guy with a very promising career in government. He was an idealistic and ambitious progressive reformer elected to office in Cincinnati during the 70s as a city councilman. He appealed to countercultural college students and blue-collar workers alike during his time in City Hall. He opposed the Vietnam War, led a successful campaign to create a city-owned bus system, and advocated reforms at the local jail. And it goes on to talk about the career that Jerry Springer had before he became that Jerry Springer. And in the conclusion, it says this: In hindsight, Mr. Springer's story lends credence to the notion that politics and entertainment have more in common than we would like to admit. If nothing else, Democrats must get past their aversion to the unseriousness of celebrity and treat it as a selling point, not a stumbling block. Why not Oprah Winfrey? Or the ESPN personality Stephen A. Smith, or the Shark Tank personality and billionaire Mark Cuban? Just pick someone who's willing to run, who's good at his or her job, and who lots of people like. Democrats would do well not to let the next Jerry Springer slip away. And as you can imagine, many people in the comments to this essay advocating for a Springer-like candidate just say this is nuts. Trump, quote, Trump was not elected because he's an entertainer. He was elected because he convinced fragile men of all races and creeds that they are victims. His phony victimization is what they share. Somebody else who said, maybe you're right, and I hate everything about that. I don't wish to be entertained by politics. I want my voice heard, respected, weighed against other voices as elected officials quietly do their jobs. I guess that's too much to ask. And then there were some thoughtful, responsive comments to the Jerry Springer-esque essay, including this. I honestly wish Jon Stewart would run. He's intelligent, he's entertaining, he could eviscerate any Republican on the debate stage. He's actually had at least superficial involvement with Congress as well. He's far more economically left than the vast majority of today's Democratic Congresspeople who are still too focused on niche social issues, et cetera, et cetera. In my opinion, you would have a winning ticket. There are other similar people as well. And then guess whose name this commenter drops? Scott Galloway. And finally, another person who said we had a smart, charismatic celebrity in Al Franken, who would have run a great presidential campaign and governed intelligently, so we Dems drove him out of office. This is what I want you to consider. A couple of months ago, I watched and talked about here a Netflix documentary that I highly recommend, 2 parts, called Fights, Camera, Action. And it was all about Jerry Springer. And it was all about how Springer started this TV show after his political career was at least on pause. He began the TV show in 1991. They had no ratings. There was a lot of competition for the afternoon talk programs. Oprah was king. 3 years later, he brings in a new producer. His name is Richard Dominic. He takes over. They go in a total salacious direction. And the ratings spike. And he becomes known as this trash TV host, Jerry Springer. And yet, in reality, he was a smart guy. He was an idealistic guy. He would tell people, he told me when he came in my radio studio and we had an interesting conversation that I've released, by the way, as a podcast. He would tell me and tell people on air, don't watch my dopey show. By 1997, he was reaching 8 million people on a daily basis, and he was putting total debauchery on TV. A turning point for Jerry Springer is when he had a Klansman against a Jewish activist, and they fought on stage. Or the day that the guy married his Shetland pony. I kid you not. Yes, there was actually a murder that seemed to arise from guests that were on a particular day's program. A woman killed her ex-husband, and it seemed pretty clear it was tied to this show. The show was horrific. The show was terrible. His guests were largely drawn from what they called the Springer Triangle, Ohio, Georgia, and Tennessee. I'm not for the coarsening of society. I believe in civility. You know that's a mantra. We like to say that angry is over. I thank every single caller. I cut off only those who become rude and abusive, which, thank God and thank you, happens very rarely. And Jerry Springer did that. He coarsened society, no matter what he was like in person. I remember when he came into the studio, it was 2009. He complimented me on hosting Rational Discourse. He said to me, whether it's on radio, when I see you on MSNBC, because I was guest hosting then for Matthews, he said, it's a rational discourse about what's going on or not. And there are a lot of people, I said, who don't want a rational discourse. Jerry Springer tried to convince me that in the end, reason would win out. I hope I'm not being misunderstood. I'm not saying Democrats ought to take someone in the mold of Jerry Springer. He also had his personal issues. Kind of a funny story. He was arrested for, prosecuted for, I don't remember exactly what, but he had a hooker episode in his life. And I remember when he was in my studio, I defended him and he didn't. I said something like, well, that ought to be legal. And he just disagreed and said, I made a mistake. So I don't want to elect somebody who's going to debase the debate. That is not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm raising with the poll question. But I am asking if Democrats need to take more of a celebrity factor into consideration. A celebrity factor and populism. Somebody who can do what Trump has done in establishing connection to people's real lives. Sure, talk about the front page, but you know the list. You know the list that resonates with a lot of people who aren't paying attention to news. And by the way, there was a story that we had yesterday from the New York Times talking about how the less people pay attention, the more supportive they are of Trump. You know what I think pierces their consciousness? Plastic straws, shower pressure, the NFL's dopey kickoff rule, reinstating Pete Rose, Harry and Meghan, Trump showing up at the MMA fights. What I'm saying is I don't like, the idea of a trash talker being a face of either party, but the celebrity quotient is missing on the Democratic side of the aisle, and you need that. I mean, why does Trump persist? That celebrity factor, but for Celebrity Apprentice, but for The Apprentice before it, he would never have been on that rise. So I'm trying to say that I read the deep dive where all the usual suspects were questioned and came up with their very philosophical answers as to what Democrats need to do and who they need to find to counter Donald Trump. And then I read the essay that said, we need somebody with some Jerry Springer. Jerry Springer, by the way, died in 2023. He was 79 years old. So don't misunderstand. I'm not asking if you want to find the next Jerry Springer. I am asking whether Dems need to do some recruiting and consideration instead of scoffing at Stephen A. Smith. I can't see Stephen A. Smith being a president either, but you know what I'm trying to say. The poll question today at Smerconish.com asks, to counter Donald Trump's influence, should the Democratic Party recruit and embrace celebrity candidates? And you know where this is going to lead. I'm going to want to know, okay, who do you have in mind? Who do you have in mind? Please go vote on the Tuesday poll question at Smerconish.com. To counter Donald Trump's influence, should the Democratic Party recruit and embrace celebrity candidates? Like and subscribe and set yourself up for notifications. Like and subscribe and set yourself up for notifications. Thank you so much for watching. Go vote.